Welcome to Money for Nothing Penny Fractions Edition, or something. We're here. I'm joined with Sam and
we're workshopping names.
Yeah, I'm joined.
Yo.
Yeah, that's David Turner from Penny Fractions. We are
Fractions for money.
This is our first episode with you as a collaborative team. And we're going to be offering you a lot of these sort of like freewheeling, maybe slightly shorter, maybe not, episodes where we discuss, just have a conversation basically about what's happening in the headlines, what you're writing about in your newsletter. And I think today we are jumping into the sad news of Bandcamp. It's over. The dream's dead.
The worst, the most wah-wah trouble.
Well, I wouldn't say...
David, is the dream not dead?
Yeah, I wouldn't say the dream's dead, though, because again, hey, I'm David Turner. You know me. You love me. I don't think the dream... Yeah, I'll come through with a hot take. I'm not sure the dream is dead quite yet. I was just reading a newsletter whose name I already forgot that said that it appeared, at least from their reading of, I guess, X feeds. I'm saying X, not the other, not the name of the social media site, but X, that site. They were saying that it seemed to be a lot of like senior management were being let go, a lot of people on the editorial side, and like a lot of folks who weren't sort of like the nuts and bolts engineers keeping the website alive, which kind of to me sounds a bit like the Twitter layoffs that happened this year, I don't remember, where it's like they just basically gutted it just to keep like the bare minimum of the thing going, which I guess if you're like an artist on Bandcamp, you can take as like, well, the site may not collapse tomorrow, so no reason to run for the hills quite yet.
And just to give a little context here.
Oh yeah.
No. Just if you haven't read the headlines, Epic Games, which bought Bandcamp like less than a year ago, more than a year ago, but not that long ago, about a year ago. Yeah, we did an episode about it. We can go ahead and link to it in the show notes. But then they recently sold Bandcamp to Songtradr, which you guys can explain more about what Songtradr is, but for like $300 million, and then basically in the last
while we don't know what they bought it for, is much less. We're pretty sure. Like it doesn't seem like Epic turned this around for a big W.
No, it definitely seems like. I mean, also it'd be pretty hard to imagine that Epic Games, who bought Bandcamp in March 2022, which if we all can remember, the early 2022, right before like crypto crash, right before Netflix and all the tech companies like stocks crashed, and they started implementing like multiple rounds of layoffs. It was like they bought Bandcamp basically at like the peak of one of the peaks of the COVID bubble.
Yeah, just reading from this Guardian article that was published today, it says that Songtradr is valued over $300 million, and just this past March acquired, I don't know, some competitor. Anyways, that doesn't matter. But yeah, so in the last 24 hours, it then came out that it just came out that over 50% of the staff of Bandcamp has been laid off, and you were saying that it's heavily like editorial.
Yeah, well, again, based on a news that I was reading earlier today, obviously a lot of these facts will come through in the coming days and weeks, but it seems like it was heavily on the editorial side, senior management, and then just sort of folks who were not like within sort of the core engineering product and sort of design teams, it seems. So again, not to be glib, but it's one of those things where you can read the headlines, be rightfully upset, be rightfully concerned, and we'll get into all of that. But I don't imagine that like SoundCloud as a platform is going to like immediately deteriorate or start immediately falling apart.
Bandcamp, David.
Bandcamp, sorry. Oh my God. Whatever.
Freudian slip, baby.
It's actually same thing. All these companies, I mean, I'll say this, but like all these companies are basically the same to me at this point. They're all like waiting just to have massive layoffs.
And just
interesting.
In case,
why do you say that?
Wait,
I want to know why you say that.
Well, I say that because like most of them. Okay, so like not to be just to go back for 1 second. Almost every tech company across the globe really hired so many people during the pandemic because they thought what happened between June 2020 and I guess December 2021 was going to be going on forever. And they bought and hired with that assumption. And many of them are coming face to face with the reality of that's no longer the case. And in fact, many of those companies, which were never profitable, have not been profitable for numbers of years, are now having to face a world of higher interest rates, and are now just kind of like, to me, these kind of semi-zombie companies just sort of walking around with like a sense of, oh, we don't make money, we don't really know how we're going to make money, and we definitely are not going to be able to survive at our current state, like our current pace. So we're just going to have to keep laying people off. I say this as someone that was laid off at SoundCloud's second round of layoffs in 12 months. And I've seen at that company, the atrophy hit really hard, where after the first round of layoffs, a lot of people skedaddled. And after the second round of layoff, people were like, why am I going to wait around to get fired? And just started leaving in droves. And I've seen similar things happen with a number of crypto companies, again, much quieter, smaller scale, where it's like after that first round of layoffs, everyone's kind of like, I don't need to kind of wait around to see the writing on the wall here. I kind of can like read the room.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, it's interesting, David, what you're saying about that. Is, before we get back to Bandcamp in particular, is what's interesting about those zombie companies that you're kind of laying out is like unlike a lot of like full bubble companies, you know what I mean, right? That are like, why do you even exist? A lot of these companies are ones that like maybe don't have a clear way of making money, but have stuck around for long enough, many of them, because we were in that low interest rate environment for a really long time. Stuck around for long enough that they've got real user bases. They're genuinely part of people's lives. They're genuinely part of people's like, experience of the world, and have been some of them for close to a decade, if not longer. And so it is this funny thing where it's like, it's not clear how they're going to grow, but also like they do actually, it's not crypto, they do actually exist.
No, Sam, you're absolutely correct. That unlike a lot of crypto companies, sorry, I keep a close eye on a lot of crypto stuff just because I still think it's very funny. That billions of dollars are invested into basically like securities fraud. That you know, some of these companies have been taken out, some more will be taken out, and who knows what happens. Anyway, but yeah, Sam, to your point, that yeah, like a lot of these companies, like a Bandcamp included, have been around for like well over a decade, and some of them may not be as profitable as Bandcamp once was, or maybe even still is today. Who really knows? But yeah, like a lot of them are going to have to sort of figure out what is sort of their future and how they're going to kind of look. I guess like from my vantage point, increasingly, I'm kind of just like, yeah, if y'all don't figure it out, a lot of the people that work at these companies are just going to wake up one day and go like, I don't need to work at a place where like I'm going through anticipating a third round of layoffs. Like that's not something as someone that just goes to work every day you're like excited to do. Even if you like the company and respect what it's doing, it's like the second round of layoffs kind of like tells you the door is probably like coming for you very soon.
David, the thing with Bandcamp though is it's also interesting, is like it's this product, but also, I mean, and I assume most people who listen to this show like are aware of Bandcamp, but it's also been built out this kind of avid community and like one of the best editorial selections on the music internet, right? Which does seem like this is going to be the major hit of the company. That one of the major hits is that like that editorial team that's produced like fabulous work at Bandcamp Daily just seems like it's gone.
Yeah, the JJ Skolnick, who a longtime editor at Bandcamp, who I've actually I think worked under, because I've actually published some articles back in the day with Bandcamp. I think they've been there 8 years. Yeah, they're one of the ones that got laid off, and yeah, it definitely feels like, yeah, I mean, regardless of like what Songtradr plans to do with Bandcamp, and I imagine it's going to probably use it for like music licensing or something. It does seem that even if the sort of the platform remains the same, like bands will still be able to like sell their music. It does seem like the editorial side of things is kaput.
Yeah, even though I guess, I don't know. I guess this is just like this. I don't want to say the cynic in me, but just like Bandcamp's editorial efforts are really great. I've ran for Bandcamp before. Really awesome. They usually pay pretty well. But like even when I was writing for Bandcamp, I guess it would have been at this point maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. I also have this sad feeling, and you guys have talked about this before, but it's like the already degraded state of music media, that writing for Bandcamp was one of the good ones. Just felt like such a fall from where things had been in previous decades, or even maybe a decade or 15 years ago. So again, I'm not happy and don't want to see anyone lose their jobs and sort of see the even further dearth of music journalism. But it also kind of just makes me feel, again, like questioning a little bit of what even is the role of something like music journalism at this moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important one of the two major threads of this, because it did feel like, and I think it might be presumptuous, David, but like what I assume partially part of your feeling about that is that Bandcamp Daily was this amazing source for music journalism, but it was like attached to a marketplace,
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
it
Right.
was not a money making endeavor on its own terms, I don't think. Like it felt a lot more like Red Bull Music Academy, where like someone somewhere was making money, and for some reason it was like being channeled through this like music cultural reportage. And like maybe, and you could totally argue that like part of like the Bandcamp ethos and the overall like vibe of why that website established the devoted following that it had was that it had this editorial component, and that people would go through it and find stuff partially based on the writing, and like that it was all part of the same thing. And that's an argument I definitely have some time for. But it also, the fact that it's not like this music writing sells subscriptions the way that like Spin worked in the 90s, meant that like when push comes to shove and when like axes start to fall, it's has a lot less of like a high ground to retreat back to, which is what seemed, unfortunately, like it happened, may have had at least been part of the reason of what happened here.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that's kind of a bit why, yeah, it's like a bummer and I'm like not happy, but it's honestly like to me, like something like Red Bull Music Academy, like in retrospect, one of the reasons I liked it in the moment and like it even more in retrospect that it was also a little bit more niche. And then it covered a very particular just kinds of music and genre that had to do with the editorial people that were there and all that. And I feel like it as like a holistic project is one that like feels a bit more coherent and a little bit more like complete to me. Where Bandcamp, because again it was attached to a full marketplace and thus was wanting you to understand a big totality, not even a big totality, but like a decent amount of the stuff that's uploaded up there every day. To me, it was always a little bit more scattershot and lacked a little bit of the curatorial vision that, like, I guess having grown up, especially reading Pitchfork in the 2000s, I really like appreciated and really like always wanted out of music journalism. And I feel like it never scratched that itch for me. And so in some ways it never felt as like immediately relevant as even like some smaller blogs I've seen come up the last couple of years where it's like, hey, well, at least I know they're going to be writing about like some random like Milwaukee rapper that I've never heard of. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, at least like I know that you're going to be covering that kind of beat along with like random SoundCloud shit versus like, oh, we're going to be covering world music today, ambient music tomorrow, funk tomorrow, like funk the next day. So like it just like it was always a little too all
Well,
over
and
the
also,
place for me.
well,
I just want to push back on that just a little bit, David, because I do
Oh
feel
yeah.
like I hear that, but I also feel like um there was a kind of, while the editorial side of Bandcamp did cover a lot of different things, like there was like over representation of certain Bandcamp related niche genres. Like the fact that there was both a monthly roundup of ambient music and field recordings was like was like a gesture towards the kind of audience of people who were like spending money on
That's
Bandcamp, and I
great.
think that did maybe have some of that holistic like editorial focus.
That's a great
yeah,
point.
I
That's
mean,
actually a very good
it's
point.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny that like we're like reminiscing about like the halcyon days of like a Red Bull Music Academy, which did great work, but was, and I think maybe the reason why we liked it was because of the fact. I mean, I also worked there, but like the reason why we liked it was because it was hands off. Like Red Bull was just like giving them money, but like now it's like the editorial does have seem to have to be tied to some sort of service or brand, because I think that like Red Bull still does editorial stuff on music and other things, but it's just so heavily catered towards servicing the brand of Red Bull now. And I think also the
I
thing about
think you're right about
and I
that,
think
and
also the thing about I think
I
also
think that has to do with the influencer economy.
yeah, well, I think also I was gonna say one more thing. Like the one thing is like I would just say that the thing about like Bandcamp that maybe always felt a little unsatisfying was that there really was no critical edge. It was just championing everything. Like it never was like, nah, that third Proto-Martyr album, nah, it was all right. It never did that. It was either like positive or nothing, which is also something that we've kind of seen change I think a lot more into like the last like, I don't know, we want to say like 10 years or so, 10 plus years.
Totally. And also, and I would say that like even on a critic as someone that's writing criticism for like a good chunk of my life, I'm fine with a thumbs up, thumbs down, like if that was sort of the binary. But when you don't even have that and it's just everything is just kind of like, hey, you should listen. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information as a reader. Like I forgot what publication I was reading, but they just had like a quick like 3 or 4 movie reviews, like very brief movie reviews, thumbs up, thumbs down. And I was like, oh, thank God. Just tell me if this Netflix movie is worth my time in like 30 seconds. The same way that you pick up like an alt weekly or if you pick up like a magazine back in the day, you don't get like a 1,000-word review, you get like a 150-word review, and you can know everything you need to know and keep it kind of moving.
I mean, thinking about those two things though, I think so Saxon, for what you were saying. Well, okay, David. So the one thing about like the no
Fine,
negatives
don't talk
or
to me.
negatives is like what?
I'm just joking.
Is like I do think that there's a different. It's kind of the question of medium is important here, right? Like in movies, there's a limited number of movies that are getting buzz, and so there is this funny thing now where like, and similarly, there's only on Bandcamp what would be the point of even Proto-Martyr, right? Which is like a quasi big indie band, maybe like post punk or whatever they are, right? Like literally, given the fact that it's not like, is this good or bad, but like, does it exist or does it, to quote my friend Ben Richmond, fall directly to the bottom of the internet? Like, like a negative review in that context doesn't do anything really. I mean, so it's this funny thing where like the only things that get negative reviews now are like either like every once in a while a like statement negative review of like a rock band or like the new Drake record every single time.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't
like unless that you need to have a shared critical vocabulary, and I think there is a thing where like if you have without a shared universe of established aesthetic touchstones and like bands that are in a scene together, it's very hard to have a negative review. So I mean, you could, I imagine, like have a more nuanced negative conversation in like what you were saying, David, like a site that's more devoted to a specific scene. Like if you're like, oh, we're a fourth wave emo site, like, yeah, well, we're all here, we all know the fourth wave emo band, so like I don't like the Front Bottoms or Mom Jeans or whatever. Similarly, like you could imagine like, oh, in a rap site being like, oh, we don't like Griselda being a meaningful position, but not in like the broader world of universe, which kind of brings you back to that maybe critique of Bandcamp, which is like, is there even a meaningful aesthetic or cultural project in reviewing everything in this day and age?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. But I think maybe it might be a good idea to sort of like just. Sorry, I just want to move the conversation away from the fucking crisis of criticism, which has been around for like fucking 100 fucking years. You know what I mean? And I think I'm more interested in the idea of the fact that like it has to be frameworked that like the only I think I'm more interested in the fact that there is no criticism now, and it's just like any kind of editorial is just linked to a brand or a service, and even that. As we see, going back to the original topic, Songtradr is like, nah, we probably don't really need this. Now that we don't really have actually no clue what's going to happen with the Songtradr owned Bandcamp, and maybe they'll keep some sort of editorial. But nonetheless, like, I think there was already kind of an issue with it because that like you two said, it was tied to a service, and like now it'll be maybe so transparently tied to a service that it will just become even worse. Like instead of like what's the hot new like ambient music, we'll be like what's the hot new ambient music that can soundtrack your indie film that you're trying to get into a film festival.
Well, I mean, Saxon, I think that like you said something really interesting about Bandcamp, right? Which is that there was this like hands-offness to the relationship between the kind of cultural stuff that they were promoting and the sales of the thing. And I just wonder if one of the things that's undercut, because I think that used to be the model for a really long time, right? It's like it's not exactly clear the relationship between advertising and selling a whole bunch of a thing. And so you kind of like throw money into a project and it makes a big splash and then you assume it comes back. And that one of the things that you get with the influencer economy is the ability to micro target specific areas with a lot of data based around like very, very hyper targeted niche. It used to be like in the old days, it was this major marketing breakthrough in the 70s of like dividing America into, I don't know, like 50 or 60 different like quote unquote tribes, right? There was like the up and coming hipsters and the like guns and blue jeans, which was different than like the Western cowboys. And like, but even compared to that, the fact that like companies now are able to micro target audiences isn't like the people who like X, Y, or Z person, like that I do feel like undercuts this like fairly this one patronage model that like maybe helped support music journalism in the wake of the like it's possible to sell magazines. So before we get to like the weirdness of Songtradr, which is like the other half of this story, there's another part of the weirdness here, which is like questions of corporations and unions, right? Like Bandcamp had a
This is
union.
the awkward ass. This is the awkward conversation.
Well, no, I mean, like,
this is
there's a
this is the awkward conversation we don't want to have, but we need to have.
well, I mean, look, Bandcamp. It seems kind of like Bandcamp had a union. Epic, which I don't think is unionized, but like unionization in but like if there's going to be a major culture sector unionization push, it's in video games, right? I think those video game companies are scared shitless of unions and their workers because those workers do a lot of work. There's a lot of ways you could unionize those companies, and it would be a big deal for video game companies that are just raking in cash. So Epic doesn't really like unions, and Bandcamp had a union, and there is a version of this which is that like Epic got interacted with the Bandcamp union and was sort of like, I don't know about like all of this union.
Fuck
Let's just
this.
sell the fucking company.
We out.
Like no, like A, we
But
out.
we don't know
and
if that's
B,
the case.
like
We don't know if that actually
no, but
happened.
like the version where like a company hires a union, buys a unionized thing, and then like flips it and like guts the union isn't. And the conspiratorial version is flips it to a company they're already working with. In doing so, guts the union, gets the services from Bandcamp that they wanted to get in the first
Yes.
place, but because there's now a subcontractor between them and the workers, they don't actually have to be the assholes, and they can get the work at a much lower
Yeah.
price. Like that's like a classic story in like 20th and 21st century capitalism. And there's a version where like, no, I don't know if that happened, but like I can't imagine that like the half of the people, like I would bet money that if half the workers at Bandcamp, about 50% of the staff were let go, I find it hard to believe that their status and engagement with the union had nothing to do with those decisions.
So I guess part of me wants to push back only because getting rid of 50% of the company kind of says to me that like ultimately they were going to do whatever they were going to do with the company, regardless of if there was a union or not. Because getting rid of 50, because again, if you think of, I guess like having been through 2 rounds of layoffs the last year and having been through other rounds of layoffs in situations like this, part of me is just like, when you do layoff, like when I worked at GMG, Gizmodo Media Group, back in 2017 and 2018, when there was a rumor that there were going to be 40% layoffs at the company, everyone basically was just like, oh, well, what am I doing here day to day? Like, what's the point of coming into work if you think of like 2 of every 5 people you see are going to be gone? Like, getting rid of 50% of the company to me kind of just sort of sounds like you guys, like, they basically were going to be doing something. again, I don't know if it's Songtradr or Epic, I don't really know, but like there was a trajectory and a vision that was enacted on this company that to me existed almost regardless of if there was going to be a union or not. Like they kind of knew that they were interested in X, Y, or Z with Bandcamp, and
Yo,
that's all that they really
maybe,
wanted. But I don't think that like,
maybe.
but I don't, yeah, I don't think having, I think if they didn't have the union, we could be sitting in the exact same place here and having the exact same conversation, and it really wouldn't be any different. I don't really think the union really like changed it one way or another because ultimately they had a vision for the company that was significantly different than what publicly they were just stating a week ago, and is also significantly different than what Epic stated a year and a half ago. Because there was nothing
Right.
about what Epic said a year and a half ago that was about like we're looking to prune the company to try to have this, and this. They kept talking about like all these integrations or ways that they can sort of work together. That never actually really came true either, which I guess is my other like thing about this acquisition, now about the Bandcamp acquisition, was like in my own newsletter, I wrote that I wasn't going to speculate on like what this means because when I worked at SoundCloud, when we bought companies, there was no vision, there was no follow through. We bought them because a certain executive or a certain team of executives wanted to buy a company to tell a story to certain people, i.e., internally or externally, and they bought the company, and then we basically spent the next few years trying to figure out what the fuck that meant. And I've seen and read that so many times with so many different companies, and especially in the tech space, where you look at companies like Amazon and Google, where you look at a lot of their acquisitions over time, and quite often those companies get shuttered, those projects ended and slowly terminated because there was never a real vision. They just basically wanted to like poach it to stop it or poach it to tell someone that we're thinking about this. It's like, I just have a really hard time sort of not just sort of thinking this feels much closer to that than there was like a vision that they're trying to enact at this point, or were trying to enact back in 2022.
Yeah, that sounds, that was the one thing I was gonna say too. I'm like, yeah, it could be, I'm sure maybe the red tape that a union causes or the difficulties that the union cause maybe contributed to it. But I think that like on our episode, or at least leading up to the episode, Sam, you and I kind of like were, I think, really trying to think through like what the fuck Epic wanted to do with Bandcamp.
Yeah.
And like, we had some theories, but I think in the end, I think the internet in general, the music journalism, music industry, internet in general was like, huh? and I think that like, that's kind of what David said. I think it might have been that case. I mean, we can't know, but I think it definitely might have been a case that like some execs had an idea about what to do with it, or like some sort of long-term vision about how it could like help something with like music licensing or music for video games or whatever, and then they just sat with it for 18 months, and then they're like, okay, let's just fucking get rid of this. Like, it's like annoying. We're not doing anything with it.
Well, except that I would argue, I mean, one of the things that's weird, a little bit weird, is timing, right? Like Epic is not talking about companies that really make stuff, right? Like the video game companies and companies like Epic are not, as far as I know, like strapped for cash, right?
Well,
So
I don't even know about that. The only reason I say that is because they did announce 16% layoffs at their own company. And they did say that we've been hiring too much the last couple of years. And also, again, I don't have like the numbers to immediately back this up because I didn't do the research, but I'm going to bet you that Fortnite is less popular in October 2023 than it was in June 2022. June 2021 or December 2020. I'm gonna bet it's less popular than it was then.
So to maybe like transition to another topic and to wrap this our inaugural conversation with as a collaborative team with David Turner of Penny Fractions. David, is there there's a couple other things that have been happening over the last couple of weeks, which you mentioned in a group chat. Do you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah, just very briefly. So yesterday, I guess Monday, October 16th, it was reported that the Hypnosis Song Fund. The Hypnosis.
Yeah,
is like
it's incredibly complicated
parts,
now,
which we've talked about before, and I don't want to re-explain. But basically, right now, Hypnosis was supposed to issue a dividend, And then yesterday they announced they will not be issuing that dividend to their shareholders because they
Oh
miscalculated.
shit!
Yeah, because they miscalculated the amount of money they were going to make on a copyright royalty board ruling. Like, again,
Whoops.
this is all so arcane. But the main takeaway that I like sort of had from this was like Hypnosis at the end of the month, which Hypnosis again is like one of the biggest sort of companies in the song asset world. Like, they've raised well over $1 billion from folks like the Blackstone Group and many other sort of like big sort of like big money folks. They were supposed to have like a shareholder vote that was supposed to be one to approve a potential sale of part of their assets to their Blackstone backed group, like their Blackstone backed fund, and then they also supposed to have a continuation vote on if the fund should continue to remain public. And then yesterday, as soon as this dividend payment was shown to not happen, their stock price went down by like over like 15%. It's now at the lowest it's ever been. Basically,
Holy
all the
shit.
reporting says there's no way that initial sale is going through, and that there's even questioning if the company may end up actually being maybe taken private after this. Which I guess, having been on your show multiple times to talk about song catalog, I just do think there is something like lightly funny, I think, starting to happen in that space where it seems like that bubble is actually starting to burst, and that like the amount of investment in the capital raise the last few years may finally be kind of sort of like hitting its sort of end state, its end stages, or at least like
Neil Young just laughing all the way to the bank.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine, and one of the things that he said he said a couple of things I thought were just really smart, which is one, some of these artists actually probably were right. Like, some of the artists that were selling in 2019, 2020, and 2021 may have been really smart to have actually sold their catalogs then.
Yeah, they
Because
saw a
for
bubble.
some of,
Yeah.
yeah, and for some of these companies, they likely are sitting on catalogs that they have no interest in actually owning. And do you know who's ready to probably buy them back? Probably some of these artists may eventually have a chance to buy back some of their things on pennies on the dollar if things don't go great.
Holy shit.
Artists, the version where artists are shorting their own
Fuck.
like artists are
Catalogs.
shorting their own the value of their songwriting as equities is unbelievable. I love that.
Yeah,
so
so I
much.
just wanted to mention that because I think there's like something. I still think there's a lot more to be said about the song asset like space. I think it's just been like a really interesting bubble to have followed the last few years, and this Hypnosis sort of latest drama and sort of royal with there is really funny. It's just very funny.
Just to wrap things up
Yeah.
with Bandcamp, though, like, what do you think, though? First off, I think we've really done our readers, our listeners, a disservice by not pointing out that Songtradr is missing all the values in the end of Trader. It's got like the most ideal tech name I can imagine, which is Songtradr. It's like Mr. Craft.
Songtradr.
Well, okay, so this is what's interesting, and it's like so dystopian it makes a lot of sense. It's very dystopian, and if it's totally possible that like another spin on what happened between Epic and Bandcamp, because Epic had a set of ideas about how to integrate something like Bandcamp into these like ongoing, basically like the metaverse is here and it's Fortnite. They realized that actually that didn't make sense directly, but something like Songtradr owning Bandcamp is really interesting. So basically Songtradr is a sync platform, right? If it is a platform that is designed to help artists license their music and help people who want to find music to license in their digital work to find music, right? And that can be, so I checked out, like poked around their website a little bit. There's got a couple different plans. Like, one is like, if you're an individual creator, there's one plan where you can both get access to like these huge bodies of royalty free songs, or that like are in the Songtradr copyright universe, or it's like Marvel. Or like you can like they'll help you negotiate and maybe have like set deals for like the use of like single songs from other stuff. But basically it's this huge warehouse of tracks that you can use to sync. And again, for anyone who's thinking about this, to remember that like there's set royalties for playing songs in public or reproducing songs, but if you make music and use it as a constituent element within a new work of art, in which means if you put it in the background of a video, that's a different license, that there's no statutory rate for that, which is why like the use of like, I don't know, street fighting man in a like Scorsese movie can cost like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, where playing street fighting man on the radio costs like fractions of a cent. And so this created this huge problem when literally a million streamers need background videos and background music for their videos. And so you've got like Songtrader's not the only one, or I don't think even close to the biggest one of these companies that basically offers warehouses of music, easily accessible music for use, and like a whole bunch of what I can only assume isn't going to be increasingly AI assisted search. So like I poked around and you can search for like songs that sound like an artist, or songs that sound like a vibe, or songs that sound like a specific song, and the the music is incredibly bad. And what's interesting is like,
maybe they're trying to make it good.
well, no, that's what's crazy though, right? Like if you had Bandcamp integrated into this, and all of a sudden you wrote to all the Bandcamp people, all the people who host their music on Bandcamp, and said like, with like do you want to opt in to like having your music potentially be licensed? We can even either pay you a flat fee, or you could be negotiated. Basically, if you could bring that other library of like far hipper, like far more music with far more critical cachet than like the just truly terrible examples of songs like hip, upbeat, dark, electronic, angry. Like those are like the descriptors for like one song.
Which actually to go full circle, and maybe there's a point to wrap up on it. I'll let you two decide that. But to go full circle, that's kind of how the editorial was of Bandcamp. Is that kind of like a fucked up thing to say? But the way that they would categorize the editorial were like best new jazz, best new ambient, best in like punk rock, best in metal. It is the sort of like weird categorizing that like will totally service
and like
this service.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're 100% wrong. And like it's like dark because it just means like music is always being used to sell stuff, like waves hand in a vague direction generally.
Absolutely.
But it's really depressing when it's like music
stuff.
being used to sell this thing, and this music being used to sell this thing for this amount, which makes this amount of money, and we have the data for it. Like that becomes like claustrophobic really quickly, I think.
Exactly.
And like it's totally possible that it just means that like all of the independent music will all of a sudden be, and some artists it'll be good for, right? You want people to be able to monetize, I guess. I mean, you want people to be able to monetize. It's just like having to say things like you want all the independent artists to be able to monetize, like makes your soul die a little bit every time you have to say it. But it's also just like the world we live in. And like, so this integration makes sense. And then maybe like given that kind of built out platform, like when Songtradr gets used by Epic, like it'll work more efficiently, because my understanding, again, from something that's kind of like beating the hedges for gossip, it seems like Epic already uses Songtradr for a variety of stuff. Like, yeah, it makes a certain amount of business sense. But yeah, it's this version where like this community is
I mean,
stripped for parts, but like
my last 2 cents I just wanted to throw into this is that Songtradr, and I guess this is for my skeptical eye, having also, I don't know, I got a lot of emails when I was working at SoundCloud from a lot of startups that like you would read their description and you're like, I have no idea what this company is doing, and then you'd be like, oh, they've actually raised money. That's frightening. Songtradr has raised over $100 million, which
valued at $300 million.
Which I would just throw out there. I'm going to guess that company's revenue is not at all anything close to justifying the $100 million that's been raised. And that's all I'll say. I mean, I could be proven wrong, obviously. But having looked at a lot of startups and looked at a lot of these companies and looked at some of the companies that Songtradr has recently acquired on the more B2B side of the business, my hunch is that this company probably does not generate a revenue, much less a profit, to justify the over 9 figures raised for them. So good luck to them.
I mean, that's also, dude, that's the most depressing version, which is that even in this like dying embers of like this market, it's sort of like you know Lord of the Rings.
Oh, actually, I don't. I've never seen them.
I'm sure our listeners have.
Sorry.
It's so funny, David, because I haven't either.
Yeah, I'm sure the listeners know. I'm the only
Well, you guys have, that's a conversation for another day. Anyway, like they defeat Sauron, who's like the big bad guy,
sorry.
but then they like go back to home, and like this like mid-level bad guy that they defeated in like the second of the 3 books has like basically like gone to their hometown and set up shop as like a low-level thug. And like having returned from the war, you expect the books to just be like over and happy, and then like no, there's another like something like 20% of the last book is like they get home and everything's fucked and nothing's okay, and they have to like deal with this final like very low stakes but very like violent situation in their hometown, and it's a total bummer of an ending that's actually, it's not in the movies. The harrowing of the Shire. And I kind of feel like the worst case scenario is like we're in a harrowing of the Shire moment where like the big bubble has burst, but like Songtradr still has some VC backed money, right? Enough VC backed money that even though they are not a functional business, they've like managed to survive many similar kind of bubbly businesses falling away, and they have just enough life left to like reach out and buy Bandcamp, which from reports, again, we don't know, and everyone's positioning themselves, was like sounded like when Epic bought it was making
Surviving.
a profit, not a huge profit, but was like a company with a cash flow. And it's totally possible that like the dying embers of the tech bubble has just enough money to buy this like profitable but slow growing company, get it, try to like do whatever the hell like tech companies do, scale in some way, realize that in order to do that and to pay off like the money that they've borrowed, raised, right, in order to do all this, like that they have to like cut corners, and doing so absolutely slash everything to the bone and ruin the company. And it's just this depressing thing where it's like, it's one thing if like Epic, which is at least a big company with resources, buys Bandcamp. It's like the most dystopian version is like, it's not even like it's not a big boss who ruins Bandcamp. It's like some weird little sync company, basically, that like this Bandcamp, which is a community that a lot of people find a lot of meaning from. And like it's possible that it'll be stripped for parts for like a third-rate grifter dream.
That's my view.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Not saying legal, yeah.
No,
we're not saying that
not.
Songtradr is a third-rate grifter dream. We're saying like absolutely not saying that. We're saying like it would be a shame if anything like that occurred, or if Bandcamp ended up being stripped for parts. But we're not insulting any company, living or dead.
And like David said, the dream may not be fully over. So we'll put a bow on this inaugural episode of the Money for Nothing Penny Fractions collab with David Turner. We'll be doing these periodically, maybe every other week, but we'll see.
And please do email either David or us with the best name suggestion. Will get a shout out in the show and the privilege and honor of having these episodes named after their suggestion. So we're struggling.
Maybe
hit us with this. Maybe.
We'll see if we like them. All right, y'all. Catch you next time. Bye.